Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Liege in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 31, Seeking Advice. Ready? Byleth asked as they both meditate on top of the roof of her quarters. Yeah, he said. Then, transfer some of your power to me, Byleth instructed. Got it, he said as he started to feel the flow of his power being transferred to Byleth. Byleth muttered as she noticed something strange. Is the influx of power is more than usual? She asked. Oh, that, he said proudly. I was just managed to figure out how to transfer some of my power to you in great quantity, and it turns out I can do it now without any difficulties, he said. Byleth narrowed her eyes. That's not good, she said. But with this, you can fight for a longer amount of time if I managed to transfer so much to you, he reasoned. And leave you vulnerable to the danger? Byleth asked. It's too reckless and dangerous, she said. But, he said, trying to argue with her. You are supposed to be protecting me, Byleth said. If you are too weak, then you would put me in danger too, you know, she said. All right, he said as put up his hands in surrender. I'm only thinking of a best way to keep you safe, he said. Well, it just wouldn't do if you hurt yourself in the process too, Byleth said. Were you worried about me, Your Grace? He asked. Of course I'm. Byleth said. If something were to happen to you, then I'll be beside myself with worry and dash, she said before she realized what she is saying. Nothing, Byleth said as she turned away from him. So, he said with a smile. You are worried about me, he said. I'm not. Byleth said. That makes me happy, Your Grace, he said with a smile. That you are fond of me, he said. Fond enough to worry about my well-being, he said. Shut up, Byleth said as she stood up. And let's continue our training, she said as she held his hand and draw the sword of Creator. She raised up the sword as she felt him transferring a small amount of his power to her. The sword of Creator is instantly covered in white flame with a hint of purple light to it. Seems like you have a easier time using his powers unlike last time, Suthies said. And it's made it easier for me to grasp how to better utilize this power too, Byleth said. Unlike when I first used it, she said before she summoned the celestial robe, turning her hair and eyes back to its former seafoam color. Yes, much easier than before, she muttered. No matter how many times he saw it, he never seemed to tire himself from admiring Byleth. Covered in the white and green light of the goddess always made her world apart from him, always seems unreachable and always so otherworldly beautiful. He heard his stomach grumble. Byleth giggled upon hearing that sound. Hungry? She asked. A little, he said. Then, we stop our training for tonight and grab something in the dining hall, Byleth said as the celestial robe disappeared and her hair and eyes turned back to dark teal and indigo. Do you think there would be leftovers from dinner? He asked. It is quite delicious, he said. If there is none, then there is still some ingredients and spices, Byleth said. You can always whip something out for the two of us, right? She said. That you are right, he said. All right, Byleth said as she turned to leave. By the way, he said. What? Byleth asked. I read in some books that Nabatean and Agarthan live a very long life, he said. Yeah. Byleth asked. So, does that mean that I have that long lifespan too? He asked. Considering that Arvel is with me and all, he said. I don't know, Byleth said. Well, yes, Suthies said. Nabateans and Agarthans indeed have long lifespan, but I never heard of someone housing a Nabatean or an Agarthan before, so that information is still unknown, she said. Though Byleth will surely live longer or even forever since she did have Nabatean blood inside her, but I don't know about you yet, Suthies said. I see, he said. Though you have me, it doesn't guarantee that it will make you immortal like her grace here, Arvel said. So, there is no telling yet, he said. Why not stick around for another century with me? Byleth asked. Maybe then, you can find your answer, she said. Century. He thought as he think about his life if he lives forever, all of the friends and companions he made in the monastery, he would have to watch them wither away while he stayed the same, unchanged by the flow of time. But, he thought as he looked at Byleth, Byleth will be by my side too, he said as his heart beats faster at the thought of spending an eternity with her. If only she is here by my side for all eternity, then, that is enough for me, he thought, looking at Byleth. Byleth was taken aback by the intensity of his gaze. What? She asked. Byleth, he said as he looked her directly in the eyes intently. He said as he felt his heart pounding in his chest. If that is the case, then, he said, would that mean that we'll always be together forever? That we'll never be apart? That I'll always be allowed by your side forever? He asked. Byleth felt her heart beating rapidly at that. Do you want to be with me forever? She asked hopefully. He said before he realized that if it turned out that to be untrue, then he would only hurt Byleth by the long shot, especially since she is looking at him in a hopeful gaze, hopeful that he'll be able to spend an eternity by her side. No, that's not it, that is not what she is hoping for. I apologize for saying something so out of line, he said with a bow, and once again, effectively putting a barrier between them. No. Byleth muttered. I'm so sorry, he said. I said no. Byleth said, I'm not going to let you go without clearing things with me. She said. Your Grace, he said, pleading to her to stop. No, you always do this to me, she said. One moment, I thought I finally managed to break through this barrier that you insistently tried to put between us, then the next you are putting an even bigger barrier between us, Byleth said, but this time, I won't let you put another one between us, she said. So, answer my question truthfully, Byleth said. Do you want to be with me forever? She asked once more. We better get going now, Your Grace, he said. Don't you dare run away from me, Byleth exclaimed as she grabs his hand. Give me an answer now, she demanded. He sighed as he grabs her and shadow flash down on the star terrace. I'll whipped something out now, he said as he let go of her hand before Byleth pulled him into her arms. No. Byleth said, not until you answer me, she said softly as she tightened her hold around his waist. He didn't bother to struggle since he knows that Byleth, like the king, possessed some sort of superhuman strength, and he would have more luck breaking his bones than her grip. I'm so sorry, he muttered. Byleth let out a heavy sigh. So, you are only saying that out of whim and not out of sincerity? She asked, sounding as though she can't handle the truth that he don't want to be with her for all eternity. No. He said as he closed his eyes. I sincerely wanted to be with you for all eternity, he said. I want it so badly that I let my mouth say what my heart wanted in the heat of the moment, he said as he leaned his forehead on top of her head. Byleth let out another sigh. But she asked. But I can't answer that, he said. Not when I could possibly hurt you by giving you hope that we will be together for all eternity, he said. That I'll always be around, he said. Not when it could turn out that I'll only be around for a lifetime with you, he said. Then, you wanted to be with me, Byleth said in relief as she put her ear over his chest, sighing in contentment as she felt the warm skin underneath his tunic, hearing the loud and fast beating of his heart. To her, the beat of his heart is oddly comforting, even if it's only for a lifetime. I'll prefer that over nothing, she said. And I would prefer that too, he said as he sighed in contentment as Byleth's familiar and comforting scent his nose. A lifetime spent with you is 1,000 times better than never meeting you at all, he muttered softly, so that Byleth would be the only one to hear the innermost wish he have kept hidden in his heart, and hoping that no one, not even the sky and the earth, will be able to hear what he uttered to her. Bias hummed as she admired her handiworks as they walked away from the scene of the crime. Such a brutal method you have there, Heracles said as he watched the clouds pass them by. You are one to talk, Bias said as they walked away from the scene of the crime. Touché, Heracles, said with a chuckle. Anyway, Bias, said as she looked at the monastery once more, we better be more careful since the Fell Star have returned, she said. So, the Fell Star is really here, huh? Heracles muttered. What? Bias asked. Believe that you can't handle her and her vessel? She asked. Me? Heracles asked. I could never have dreamed of going toe-to-toe with Lady Suthies, he said. I couldn't possibly raise a hand on a lady, Heracles said, unless I have a reason to, he said with a chuckle. Or you are just lazy, Bias said. Well, I prefer laid back, but you do you, Heracles said with a grin as they disappeared from sight. You have been improving, laddie. Alois said with a smile. He smiled at Alois and scratched his cheek at the compliment, feeling bashful all of a sudden. Thank you, Alois, he said with a light blush painting his cheek and bashful smile on his lips. That means a lot to me, he said. By the way, laddie, Alois said. Yes. He asked. Did you do something to her grace? Alois asked. Not that I recall anything in particular, he said. Why? He asked cautiously. Nothing in particular, Alois said, except, he said. What? He asked nervously. The Archbishop is quite chirpy all morning, Alois said, even humming a tune to herself. He said, the goddess must have been smiling upon us this morning for all of the monastery to be graced with the sight of her smile, Alois said. Why ask me this? He asked. Alois looked at him as though he just grown two heads. Because you are always the one putting her in a good mood, laddie, he said. I'm sure that wasn't the case, Alois, he said with a shake of his head. I'm not the only one who is the sole reason of why she is happy, he reasoned. You are right, but, Alois said. But, he asked. You are always the main reason why she is happy, Alois said. Ever since she met you, she have been happier, more relaxed, he said, and that is not an easy feat to achieve, Alois said with a chuckle. He can't help but laugh at the older man's antics. Whatever you say, Captain, he said. I better get going and pick her up, he said. Oh. Alois said as he raised an eyebrow. Did you and her grace have plans today? He asked. It's a secret, he said with a smile. Well, enjoy yourselves, Alois said with a smile, and no worries here. We'll take care of things while you two are away, he said with a smile. I'll appreciate that, Captain, he said. My, Manuela said as soon she heard her passing by the infirmary on her way back to her office. So, the news of you being in a good mood all day is true, she said. Hello, Manuela, she greeted as she stopped walking. So, did Shay did something that put you in such a mood today? Manuela asked. She just smiled brightly at Manuela at that question. I'll take that as a yes then, Manuela said, contemplating whether or not she would ask for more details. What you got there? She asked as she noticed several books she is carrying. Romance novels, she said nonchalantly. I didn't peg you for someone who likes reading romance novels, Professor, Manuela said. I'm reading for the sake of research she said as she realized something. Wait, she thought, looking at Manuela who is currently blinking in confusion at her. Maybe, Manuela knows about that, she thought. Manuela, she called out. Yes. Manuela asked. Can we talk? She asked. About what? Manuela asked. Well, she said. So, someone told Shay that whenever you feel uneasy, Manuela said as he put her teacup down, all he have to do is whisper sweet nothing to you, embrace you, and give you a kiss, she said. She nods. And after that Shay kinda looked uneasy at the thought of doing that to me, she said. Not that I mind or anything about him actually doing it, but for some reason, she said. What? Manuela asked. I felt unpleasant when he looked uneasy at the thought of him doing those with me, but I also felt unpleasant at the thought of him doing so just because he felt like he have the obligation to, just because I'm upset, and I meant that as he is doing it out of duty, not because we both wanted the same thing, she said, trying to explain it as best as she can. She said with a sigh, since it only further her confusion about her feelings with Shay. I'm just so confused, she said. Manuela just smiled softly towards her. An embrace and sweet words to your ears is one simple thing to do, even if it wasn't usually done with sincerity, she said, but a kiss is a matter of life and death for some, Manuela said. How so? She asked. A kiss can be done by a friend or a lover, Manuela said, can be interpreted as a sign of affection of a friend or a more intimate matters of the heart, she said. I don't know what you are saying at this point, Manuela, she said. Do you know anything about a kiss, Professor? Manuela asked. In theory, yes, she said. It's just putting two lips together, and that is all I know, she said. I done it with the comrades I was trying to resuscitate, she said, and the novels I was reading doesn't give me a lot of insight either, it just gave me all the general knowledge I already have, she said. Manuela sighed patiently. Then, how about I ask you this? Manuela asked, making her perk up in interest. Do mind kissing Suthies and Arvel? Manuela asked. She shakes her head no. The thought of kissing the two doesn't bother her in the slightest, since she wanted to show appreciation of sort to them for being there for her and Shay, even if they argue a lot or tease them a lot. Then, how about Flane and Seath? Manuela asked. She shakes her head no again. They are family. Then, how about Dimitri? Manuela asked. She shake her head no. Dimitri is a good man. Then, Manuela said, how about Shay? She asked. That seems to get a reaction out of her, and she doesn't know how. With Shay? She asked, trying to confirm if she heard Manuela right, as she felt her heart flutter and her stomach suddenly become a garden of butterflies at the thought of kissing Shay. At the same time, despair blossomed in her heart as she remembered how uneasy he is at the thought of kissing her, and that mortified her more than the fact about kissing him. Manuela's eyes soften. Does the thought of kissing him mortify you, Professor? Then, it is even more mortifying if it's on the lips, she said, and that's what that person probably meant, she said. Manuela Suthies internally shouted. Oh, on the lips, with Shay? She asked before she looked to the side, fist on the lower half of her face, hiding her blush. For some reason I find it that I don't want him to do that out of obligation to me, she said. And you shouldn't let him too, Professor, Manuela said. What do you mean? She asked. If a man wanted to kiss you just because he is uneasy, just means that he is taking advantage of your feelings to him, and a man who kissed you because he thought that it would make you feel better out of obligation, then he have no consideration of what you would feel after the fact, Manuela said. You see, she said before taking a sip of her tea, a kiss is a sacred and most obvious sign of affection. Kissing someone on the cheek is a sign of closeness to that person, but a kiss on the lips is a sign of oath, Manuela said as she put her tea down. An oath? She asked. Yes, why do you think people kissed after taking their vow to one another during a wedding ceremony? Manuela asked. That kiss, along with their words of vows of love to one another, is just another way of saying that they are taking an oath of their love for all times. That other person is allowed to come closer to them and to give themselves to one another, she said. That's why a kiss is not something you can give to just about anybody, it's something solely belongs to the one you want to exchange oaths with, Manuela said. Really? She asked. And the reason why Shay looked uneasy is because he must have thought that he is unworthy of you, Manuela said. Unworthy to make an oath to you just as he felt unworthy of receiving yours, she said, and you can't sell yourself short, Professor, she said. Shay is a good man, but he is not without any fault. That's why if you want to test him further, find out if he is indeed worthy to receive your oath and his oath is worthy for you, then don't hesitate to further test him, Manuela said. If he backs away and gave up, then he is not worth it, but if he persevere through it all, then, Manuela said with a giggle, that's for you to decide, she said. She smiled as she managed to get a little clarity on the matter. I Well, she said. Then, you are satisfied with this for now. Suthies thought. Now that was said and done, she thought as she started to fume, this is your fault, grape-headed twerp. Suthies thought as she fumes. Seeing smokes in front of her eyes, she turned her eyes down towards the pendant on her chest who is currently emanating small smokes and raised a confused eyebrow on Suthies as she is busy cursing Shay to hell and back. And as if to answer some sort of summon from the barrage of curses Suthies is throwing at the hapless knight. Something about me? Shay asked as he enters the office and in his tunic and trousers with his shoulder and chest armor and black boots. The devil have appeared. She immediately sat upright upon hearing his voice. Oh, good timing. Manuela said as she sat up and went to where she is sitting and pulled her out of her seat before turning her to face Shay. What do you think of her outfit of the day? She asked. She attempted a peek at Shay to gauge his reaction. Would he like it? Oh. Shay said as he pounded his fist on his palm. She is wearing a skirt and a blouse. He said happily. She shot him a glare. Manuela sigh. Seems like you have your work caught up to you, Professor, she muttered as she is starting to feel pity for Byleth. The man is just too dense to notice. What? Shay asked in confusion. Moron, Arvel muttered with a sigh. What did I do? Shay asked. Yep, this is definitely the twerp's fault. Suthies thought in annoyance. Chapter 32, Training and an Unknown Feeling. Aren't you two overdoing it a little lately? Heracles asked as he watched Anaximandros handle someone rather crudely. What's wrong with having a little fun while we are at it too? Bias asked. There, Anaximandros said as he finished doing whatever he is doing. I'm done, he said before he decapitated his victim. They are yours, he said as he sat down in one of the chair in home with Guy Balg on his shoulder as he put his foot on the table. How crude can you get, Anaximandros? Bias asked as the spell activated. They are only beast, Anaximandros said, and a beast should be dealt with as they should be dealt, he said with a smirk. Heracles didn't say anything as he lights another cigar. Have something of a problem with this arrangement? Bias asked. Nah. Heracles said, as long as I'm being paid, he said before smiling, and get direct stuff, then I have no problem with you and your little ragtag team, Heracles said. Well said, Bias said as the whole family got reconstructed and go on about their day as though the bloodshed and debauchery did not happen earlier. Now, shall we move on? She asked. We shall, Anaximandros said. Heracles sat upright and followed the two out of the house. And so, as the divine Ceros have grace her presence to the humanity, she said before her eyes caught sight of Shay who is listening to her sermon quite intently, and brought swift judgment against the army of heretics. The Immaculate One have descended the heaven to aid the divine Ceros in her quest to once more bring peace in the lands, she said as she saw the nun scoot closer to Shay, and have the goddess smiled upon them in this battle. She asked, let us find out in the scripture of Macule 9:9, she said, and this is what we can read, she said as Shay smiled towards the nun when the nun attempted to touch the bandage on his cheek. The Immaculate One is the scourge of the goddess. She said intentionally loud to catch the nun and Shay's attention back to her, the one she sent to send her divine deliverance towards the heretics that dare point their swords to the goddess, she said, and with the prayers of her followers, the goddess have sent her aid to them and guide them towards victory, she said, trying to ignore the familiar murky and unpleasant feeling in her chest, and went about the sermon as the nun and Shay shared a silent conversation to one another. So inappropriate, and he ought to keep his eyes on her. He watched in the sidelines as Byleth conversed with a nobleman. The way her mechanical smile make him uncomfortable, since he is so used to seeing her smile or laugh so naturally that the polite and mechanical smile just made him uncomfortable. Then, Your Grace, the nobleman said as he come closer to Byleth. Too close for his opinion. Byleth said as she back away a little. Yes, I shall see you soon, she said. The nobleman grabbed her hand, gave a rather languid kiss on it while staring seductively into her eyes. What the hell are you doing? He thought as he almost sprung into action before the man abruptly separated from Byleth and left. Byleth shot him a confused look before looking away from him, seemingly remembering some sort of misgiving he did before leaving him to regroup with the other knights for their afternoon training while she went and go with the nuns and monks for their afternoon secular activities. "What is up with her?" he muttered, scraping his head in confusion. "Did she get angry that I got in her way with that nobleman?" he asked as he felt his chest tightened at the thought of Byleth being with another. "Why does the thought make me feel unpleasant? Whoever she choose to be with is none of my business, but," he thought as he felt his chest tighten again at that thought, "even though I promised myself that I would be happy so long as she is happy, yet," he thought as he put his hand over his heart, "why did that bother me so?" he thought. "I told you once and I told you twice," Arvel said. "You are a moron," he said. "And why the sudden insult?" he exclaimed. "Figure it out yourself, dum-dum, Arvel." "You know," he said. "What?" Arvel asked. "You are getting better in picking up some of more updated speech patterns," he said happily. "Well, I'm learning," Arvel said, "but this doesn't change the fact that you are a moron," he said. "Now, you are just being mean," he said as he went to the training grounds for the night's afternoon training. "Hell yeah. A burly man said as soon as he stepped into the training ground. "I get to fight Professor's infamous knight," he said happily. He said a little confused at the man's enthusiasm. "Who are you again?" he asked as he went into a fighting stance. "Oh, right, the burly man said. "Name's Raphael Kristen, former student of the Archbishop," he said. "Nice to meet you, Shay," Raphael said. "I guess you heard of me already," he muttered. "Through the rumor mills," Raphael said. That is bad," he thought. What did you hear?" he asked. "They said that you are a strong knight and very very close to Professor," Raphael said, "though I don't know what they meant by that," he said. "I think I do, I think I do," he thought as he heard Arvel chuckling. "Anyway, it's an honor to be sparring with you," Raphael said. "As do I," he said. "En garde," he said. Raphael charged headlong towards him with his fist at the ready. He parried the training gauntlet downward before he threw a punch towards Raphael's back, but the larger man managed to recover quickly and deliver a punch on him on his cheek. That throws him off a little, but recovered quick enough to roll out of the way of Raphael's punch, which connected to the brick floor of the training ground, leaving a slight dent on it. "Suthies, damn it, Seath would have a fit," he thought. "We just finished repairing the training grounds," he thought. "He is still apprehensive about letting you and the Archbishop use the training grounds after the mishap that happened last week," Arvel said. "Ah, yes. The last time him and Byleth are here, the whole training ground almost got reduced to dust since, well, that is something for another time, but now." He jumped away from Raphael's attack before he countered it by throwing a jab to him. Raphael nudged his sword aside, making him recoil by the heavy attack before he regained his footing just in time to at least brace himself to break the impact of the attack. Raphael's gauntlet connected with his cheek again, making him recoil to the side. He took a moment to recover before his eyes landed on Byleth with the knight talking to her before the knight says something that made Byleth laugh genuinely about what it is, and just like that he got distracted and turned his entire attention to Byleth and the knight, gritting his teeth and tightening his hold on the wooden sword before. "Ah," Raphael mumbled as his fist collided on his stomach, effectively throwing him off balance, making him hit the floor with loud thud and knocking the air out of him even further. "I'm so sorry," Raphael exclaimed as he lay there winded and a little disoriented. "Are you okay?" he asked. He nods yes before he got onto his feet, only to wobble as the world begun to spin. "I think you should go to the side and rest up," Raphael suggested. He said as his vision is starting to clear away. "I think so too," he said as Alois comes to his side and helped him to the side. "Take it easy, laddie," Alois said. "I look so lame," he said as he lay down on the bench, and in front of her grace too, he said as he felt something foreign in his chest, and he suddenly felt ashamed that Byleth saw him get beaten just like that. Don't worry about the Archbishop's thinking about you like that, laddie, Eloise said. More often than not, she actually finds it adorable that you are lame most of the time, he said. It elicits a lot of laughs and giggles out of her, Eloise said. I don't know if that helps my manly pride or anything, but thank you for telling me that I managed to entertain her, he said with a chuckle as a swell of pride blooms in his chest at the thought that he can make Byleth laugh on a daily basis more than anyone else. Oh, you made her happy by just being there, laddie, Eloise said softly. I highly doubt that, he said with a chuckle. Who would be happy being with someone like him, a lowly nobody the Archbishop managed to pick from somewhere, let alone the woman who picked him up from nowhere. Just take it easy now, laddie, Eloise said softly. He nods as he closed his eyes before hearing the loudly cheering of the crowd and Byleth's voice as well as the sound of woods against woods. Guess, they are now sparring with the Archbishop. He closed his eyes as he started to try and dozed off when. Do you need something, Circe? Sophia asked. He opened his eyes and was greeted by the gentle brown orbs looking at him in worry. Long time no see, Miss Sophia, he said with a silly grin. Sophia simply giggled at him. We saw each other during the morning service, Circe, she said in amusement. Really? He asked. I must have been missing your company all morning then, my lady, he said. You are always saying something so funny, Circe, Sophia said. It's almost cruel, she said. How so? He asked as Sophia lifted his head before putting it on her lap. Because someone might mistook it as you flirting with them and might have given them hope that you somehow reciprocated their feelings, Sophia said as she run her fingers through his hair. And hope is even more painful than rejection, Sophia said. And why? He asked. Because by having hope a person will continue to hold on to the wish they have in their heart, hold on to it in the hope that it will come true when it could possibly be the other thing. A pain that will last a lifetime, Sophia said, but with rejection, the pain will only last a while before it will get better, she said before she looked at him once more. And I hope you wouldn't do that to me, Circe, Sophia said. What's that supposed to mean? He said before he heard a sudden crunch making him look towards Byleth's direction. What was that? She thought as her eyes caught Shay and that, none together, making her attention shift towards the two instead of the sparring session she have with Raphael. Gotcha! Raphael roared as soon as he saw her being distracted. She managed to catch Raphael's gauntlet before it hit her with a crunch. Damn it! Raphael said as she holds his hand tightly. She took a deep breath in an attempt to stop the ringing in her ears at the sight she witnessed. That's all, Raphael? She asked as she tightened her grip on his wrist. I taught you better than that. She said as she turned around and threw him to the ground, hard enough to knock him out. The knights and the overlooker cheered at the victory of their archbishop. She looked at Shay and that nun who is now chatting happily, and a disgusting and hateful feeling started to envelope her heart, and she don't know how to deal with it since it's different than the ones she felt before. This one is more oppressive and more intense. Your Grace, Seath called out to her, making her turn away from Shay and that nun. We are done for today, she said. Can you stop laughing already? He said in annoyance as he wiped his hair dry. But you are so lame out there. Edwin said. The way you got beaten was just hilarious, he said. I was distracted. He said as he threw the towel towards Edwin, hitting the other man in the face, effectively muffling his laughter. And that makes it even funnier, Edwin said as he removes the towel from his face, the strongest and the favorite of the Archbishop being knocked out because he is so distracted by the Archbishop's smile. He said, how sappy can you get, Circe? Edwin guffaws. I wasn't. He said as he put his trouser on. I was just surprised by that blow, he said, telling the half-truth as he puts his boots on. Right, Edwin said as he put his tunic on. But onto a more serious topic, Edwin said, taking a more serious tone. Are you and Her Grace involved in a romantic affair? He Asked. He took a peek at Shay's bare torso to look for any telling that he is lying about his relationship with the Archbishop. Of course not. He exclaimed. Then, do you like the Archbishop? Edwin asked. He is not sure about the question. Of course I do. She is a great person all over and she is just amazing, he said. I didn't mean as a friend, Shay, Edwin said. I meant do you like the Archbishop in a romantic light, he said. What? He exclaimed, blushing up a storm. What are you talking about? He asked as he tried to calm his beating heart before seeing Edwin's serious face, and he suddenly felt the weight of the question. Yes or no? He said, still blushing. I don't know, he said. That type of question is a hard question disguising itself like an easy one since it's that type of question that doesn't have definitive answer, he said. Edwin just chuckled. That's definitely an interesting answer, he said with a chuckle. It was you, wasn't it? He stated as he slipped his tunic on. What? Edwin asked before whistling innocently. The one who told Miss Sophia to come to me when I was resting earlier, he said as he fixed himself. Whatever do you mean? Edwin asked in genuine confusion. Miss Sophia wouldn't have come to me in her own without you pushing her forward, he said before Edwin elbowed him on the side. What was that for? He exclaimed. For taking Miss Sophia for being spineless, Edwin said. I wasn't. I just thought that she is too timid to do that. He said. And she proved you wrong, Edwin said. She is straightforward if she wanted to, he said with a smirk. Better get ready for an even bolder attack from her from here on out, Edwin said. This genuinely confused him. Attack him? With a sword? Miss Sophia wouldn't do that to him, right? You are too dense to figure it out, Edwin said. A question with no definitive answers, huh? He said, but I think it's more of a matter of who is answering the question rather than a question with no definitive answers, he said. He just looked at him in confusion. Chapter 33, Preparation for Battle. Bias sighed in annoyance as she felt every eyes on them. Was it always like this with the descendants of the beast? She muttered in annoyance before sipping her tea with every ounce of grace she have. Well, going for my opinion, Heracles said after sipping his drink before turning his purple eyes towards the two. Anaximandros looks normal enough, like any mercenary you'll come upon in a place like but, Heracles said. But Bias asked. You are the very image of nobility, and a noblewoman would rather be found dead than be found dining in this dingy and flea-infested place they call a tavern, Heracles said with a smirk. Oh. Bias said with a sneer. Was I supposed to be insulted or flattered by your compliment? She asked. Take it as you like, my lady, Heracles said with a grin, but you are in no right to complain if you decided to dress like that, he said. Eye-catching and all when this is supposed to be a secret mission, Heracles said. Hey, what's wrong with doing things while looking stunningly beautiful? Bias asked. Well, nothing wrong with it if you want to be a stunningly beautiful puddle of stain on the road, Heracles retorted. This is the Fellstar's vessel you are going to tussle with, he said. I'm sure she is strong enough make you scream a stunningly beautiful uncle, Heracles said with a chuckle. Complain, Bias said, when you have no right to do so since you are under the protection of my labyrinth spell, Bias said as she saw the area around Heracles warp a little. You really should watch your tongue if you want to be protected by it even further, Bias said. I might or might not, Heracles said, but I guess I'll behave for now since this is a convenience to me, he said. Well, it did protect us from being detected by the 3 Agarthans and 4 Nabateans, Heracles said, and I'd rather stay away from them, he said, if I can guess, Heracles said. What? Bias asked before sipping her tea. This spell caused some sort of distortion in the senses, Heracles said. That is correct, Bias said. What you are witnessing right now is but a fragment of a larger spell, Bias said. What does it do? Heracles asked curiously. The name is a telltale of what the spell is, Bias said. Labyrinth means a maze, right? Heracles asked. Yes. Bias said, my labyrinth is a spell that caused distortion to another person and confusion. She said once they are trapped in the spell, they will never be able to find a way out of it unless they managed to dispel it, Bias said. And how did you procure such a wide spell? Heracles asked. By the help of a tool, of course, Bias said. Are you familiar with the term compassus? She asked. That's another name for the navigational tool the people of Fodlan now called as compass, right? Heracles stated. It seems like you aren't as dumb as you look, Heracles, Bias said. Well, I do my best, Heracles said, but why the fancy name? He asked. It's fancier that way, Bias said as her eyes flashed red before the whole area warped into a hazy void. The buildings around them as well as some people seems displaced and even distorted. This world of Labyrinth is a world where it is possible to get lost into and impossible to get out of, she said. Once you are trapped, there is no way out but death, Bias said, and the Archbishop should be honored that I took my sweet time preparing such a thoughtful and lovely greeting for her upon our meeting, she said as she cast a spell on several people in the tavern. I sure hope she is a very accommodating host worthy of such greeting, Bias said with a wicked grin as the compass glowed in a dark purple light as the people in the tavern disappeared and she dispelled the spell, leaving them as the only remaining people inside an eerily empty tavern as they dine the silence away. The silence is killing her as they walk towards her bedchamber while taking the scenic route, which meant that they practically went around the monastery. Hey, angry with each other or not, both of them have agreed that it doesn't mean that their time together should be cut short. What are you being angry about? She asked, finally snapping from the silence of their walk. What are you being angry about? She asked back, not looking at her. Can you cut it out already? She snapped. You are acting like a child ignoring me like this. She said. I'm acting like a child. She snapped back. What about you? You are the one who gave me the cold shoulders since morning. He exclaimed, and I don't even have any idea why, he stated. So, who is acting childish here, Your Grace? He asked. Okay, he made a fine point, but just remembering him and that woman and the way they look so happy being together, and they almost look. A murky and painful feeling sprung forth from her chest, intense and unwelcomed. She don't like feeling like this, but she don't know how to take out her frustration about her inadequate knowledge about love, and she isn't even sure if she love him like that. She cleared her throat. You and Ms. Durstein are rather close, she said, trying to ignore that murky and painful feeling again. What do you mean? She asked. You and her are having such a lovely time chatting away while the rest of the night trained, she said. My, aren't you a ladies' man, sir? She said. She promptly turned red. I wasn't chatting happily with Miss Sophia. He exclaimed. You called her by name, she muttered as she felt that painful and murky feeling intensify. Why does that nun get to be called by name when she barely called her by hers? It was always Your Grace, even if they are alone together, or milady when they are in town together. So, when is the wedding? She asked in spite. We are not like that, Your Grace, she said. You seem to be enjoying her company, and quite so with physical contact with her, she said, remembering how the nun keeps on running her grabby fingers through Shay's hair when here she is barely managing to be called by her name. How about you? She asked. What about me? She asked. You seems to like that nobleman from the morning, and you are quite friendly with some other guy. She exploded. You mean that nobleman? She asked in disgust. And what other guy? She asked in confusion. The one you are laughing with earlier, she said. You seem happy just talking to him, he said, and he said, looking straight into her eyes and turning a pretty shade of red. Never mind, she said. Could it be, she thought, hearing Shay mumble something under his breath. Shay also felt that too. He doesn't like it when another man is closer to me than he is. She thought, looking into his eyes. So, I'm not the only one that felt this uneasiness. He felt that way too. Does that mean that he feels the same as I feel for him? She thought as hope started to blossom in her chest, the hope that he might have feelings for her that went above and beyond the affection of a knight to his liege. That wasn't your business, she muttered as she looked away, blushing and feeling her heart beating rapidly in both euphoria and excitement at the possibility that Shay might have felt the same way as she is too. I crossed the line there, Shay said softly. My apologies, he said. Silence enveloped them as they felt the warm afternoon wind in their hair, two hearts swaying in confusion and minds wondering about the other's feelings to them, and their two divine friends internally screaming at their respective vessels, confusion which is unheard by aforementioned vessels. She took a peek at Shay and appreciate the way the light of the setting sun shine on him. His boyish features, his purple eyes, and his everything that she finds that she loves to look at. How she wished she can just gaze at him without reservation or fear of what he might think of her if he caught her looking at him. Byleth, Suthies called out so suddenly, effectively making both Byleth and Shay's heart jump out of their chest. So, Suthies, she screamed in surprise as she was brought out of her reverie. What? She asked. I want you to give me to the twerp, Suthies said. What for? She asked, looking at Shay, who is slowly backing away from her. And what are you backing away from me for? She asked. I just have a feeling that somehow I'll be dragged into another scheme you or Suthies or both have already hatched, Shay said. Hey, it wasn't always that bad, she retorted. Right, Shay said, remembering all the things he got into trouble for because a certain archbishop managed to get into trouble. It's nothing like that, Suthies said. I want you to help me make something tonight, she said. And Byleth, she said. What? She asked. I want you to train alone tonight, Suthies said. Sure. She said as her and Shay looked at each other in confusion at the goddess' strange request. We are back, big sister, Ignatz said. And we brought you takeouts. Raphael said happily as he showed her a paper bag. Oh, Valerie said as she looked behind her to greet her boys. Welcome back. She said as she went back to cleaning the dishes. You two got back later than I expected, Valerie said. Well, the training with Professor got a little too heated and well, Raphael said. She knock you out? Valerie asked, chuckling a little. I almost have her, I swear. Raphael said. Professor is just too quick to act, he said. Well, you better train harder then, big guy, Valerie said with a small smile. Say, Miss Valerie, Raphael said. Yes. Valerie asked. Do you want to go around town tomorrow? Raphael asked. I would love to, but why? Valerie asked. Well, Ignatz said, we figured that you need some day off every now and then, he said. And we figured that this is a way to thank you for working so hard every day and for helping me around the inn, Raphael said. Well, I have nothing better to do and I do enjoy helping around, Valerie said. I don't see anything that is worth thanking for, she said. Please, we insist, big sister, Ignatz said. Valerie looked thoughtful for a moment. If you insist, she said. Ignatz and Raphael smiled at each other upon her agreement. And I guess spending the weekend with my two favorite boys is a good way to spend it, Valerie said with a smile. Raphael and Ignatz's smile grew larger. He said as he tasted the batter for the sweets Suthies is making him do. Am I doing this right, Suthies? He asked. Not quite, Suthies said. The batter is too liquidy and too sticky and I have no idea how in the world did you manage such a feat, Suthies said. Please, don't become a Louise, he said with a groan. More doing and less complaining. Suthies said. I don't want you messing this beautiful and exquisite recipe of mine, she said. Is it really that amazing? He asked. Oh, you have no idea how heavenly that tea cake you are making, Shay, Arvel said. Oh, he said, raising an eyebrow towards the pocket watch hanging on his belt. Is that a praise, Arvel? He asked in amusement. I'm only giving my honest opinion, Arvel said, and if a pocket watch can turn its head away to hide its blush, he would have done it right now. My, I didn't expect a compliment from you, Epimens, Suthies said. I'm flattered. Suthies said as she laughed, making the pendant around his neck bounce with each laughter. I'm praising the sweets, not you, overgrown lizard. Arvel said as he bounced up and down in annoyance. Whatever you say, soft boy wannabe, Suthies said smugly. A praise is a praise, she said. I give compliments to where it is due, and that wasn't to you. Arvel said, still bouncing up and down in annoyance. I really prefer Bylitha's voice over the arguing of these two, he thought blankly as he readed the cakes while Arvel and Suthies argue. Focus on the tea cakes and not on the Archbishop. Arvel said, I want those to come out perfect. He said. And if somehow a pocket watch can drool, then he is sure Arvel would be drooling a river now. You can't even eat those. He said. Move your hands more than your mouth, twerp. Suthies said, I want those sweets to come out fabulous and exquisitely delightful. She ordered. Too bossy, he said. More working, less snarking, twerp. Suthies said. Yes, yes, he said blankly. One yes is enough. Suthies said as she shakes in annoyance. Yes, he said. Don't you patronize me. Suthies said as she started bouncing all over the place in annoyance while she emits small smokes. She sat on the roof of the dining hall, meditating into the warm air of Blue Sea Moon. The air is pleasant, but she can hear sounds of arguing and Suthies ordering Shay around from down below and put her hand over to where Suthies is supposed to be. Weirdly enough, she thought as she looked at the place where Suthies would be hanging, I feel lonely without Suthies and Arvel, she thought before she looked at her hand, and Shay came to mind and how in this time, he would be beside her, holding her hand and meditating beside her, but when Shay is not here I feel, she thought, still looking at her empty hand uneasy, she thought, I don't like the feeling when Shay is not here, she thought looking at her hand. She wasn't always a creature that get attached this easily, and she wasn't the type to get lonely when she is alone, but since she and her father went to Garag Mach and she become a professor, she learned how to express emotions and she have been happy since. But with Shay, it's different. She have been going through a Pegasus ride since he arrived, and she finds herself getting attached to him faster than when she got attached to her students, interaction with people and bonding with them. She initially thought that it was such a bothersome thing to bond with other people since she never stayed in one place long enough to call home and she never have a chance to bond with someone, such as the life of a mercenary. But now she hummed to herself as she smiled to herself. Not bad, she muttered. Chapter 34, A Lesson for the Heart. Hey, there. Edwin greeted as he saw the brunette nun in the cathedral after the choir practice that night. Sir Eddie. Sophia said as she perked up upon seeing the raven-haired knight approaching her. Patrol duty? She asked. Yes, Edwin said, on my expense because of Shay since he is busy being the goddess baker for the night, he said. Not with her grace? Sophia asked as she accidentally let out a sigh of relief. No, Edwin said before smiling. Did that put your heart at ease, Miss Sophia? He asked, smiling thoughtfully at the nun. What? Sophia said. I don't really mind if the Archbishop and Sir Shay spend their time together. And what? She asked when she noticed that Edwin is chuckling softly at her. It's no secret anymore, Miss Sophia, Edwin said. The whole order of the nun and priestess already know that you hold Sir Shay in high regards, he said. And well, Edwin said, they are all conflicted on who to cheer on to in a bid for Sir Shay's heart, he said. The Archbishop or you? Edwin said. Oh, goddess, Sophia said in embarrassment. Well, he is a good guy and all, but, Edwin said. But, what? Sophia asked, still covering her face with her hand. Why Shay of all people? Edwin asked. If you are looking for a dashing and strong knight, there is plenty around here. Hell, look deeper into former kingdom, empire, and alliance territories and you'll find a surplus of handsome and dashing knight in them. He said. So, why Shay? Edwin asked. Ah, Sophia said, I suppose I can tell you a story as we walk. She said, so, there's a reason why I'm so enamored with Sir Shay, Sophia said with a soft and loving smile as she started to recall a memory. Judging from that lovely smile of yours, I say that it is a fond memory, Edwin said. Oh, it is, Sophia breathed out dreamily. How so? Edwin asked. Well, Sophia said. The streets of Inver was in chaos as the kingdom's army broke the gates and entered the city. The city was riddled with fleeing residents and soldiers as the fighting erupted. This day marked the day of the end of the 5 years' war that have plagued Fodlan. Over here. She called out to the fleeing families towards the church in Inver. She recalled that the emperor have sent a missive to the kingdom's army to leave any church and the opera house in the city untouched for the purposes that it is supposed to be a safe haven for those who are fleeing the ensuing chaos, in which the king have agreed to and even ordered his troops to leave any civilians alone quickly. She said as she ushered the family inside the church as she saw a green-haired man flying to the direction of the church and she begun to fear the worst before the man brought down a child and left to continue fighting the imperial army. Come on, little one, she said as she ushered the little girl inside. The little girl shook her head no. What's wrong? She asked. My big sister is still out there, the little girl said with a sob. I need to find her first, she said. She say a silent curse in her mind as she heard that. The streets is a battlefield now and as the fighting goes now, it would be impossible to come out as unscathed since there is some civilians loyalist that joined in the fighting and right now, the soldiers on both sides can't distinguish who is a friend or an ally, a civilian or a soldier. Nobody can tell anymore in this chaos but my big sister, the little girl said with a sob. She took a deep breath. What did your big sister look like? She asked. And that's how she found herself navigating in the battlefield that was once called the Inver. She shot an Aspirita spell towards a kingdom knight before he managed to hurl a hand axe to her, effectively weakening the knight. Her aim is not to hinder the kingdom's and the church's effort to end this war as soon as possible, but she wanted to help evacuate those who are still seeking shelter. The once beautiful streets of Inver have somehow become a sea of blood and insides and she grimaced at the sight of it. She have seen her share of bloodshed during this dastardly long war and she isn't a warrior but a healer, but she is also human, but she still did her best to help. Another shout and another sound of metal on flesh can be heard. Another person dead. She will offer a prayer for the deceased after the fighting have settled, but for now, she will focus on the task at hand. She searched every nook and cranny of the chaotic street and was about to lose hope when she heard crying in one of the corner stalls, and there she found a girl barely aged 10 crying and shaking as she hid in one of the crates, and to her relief, she matched the description of the little girl. Who dash, the girl is about to ask. I'll explain later, but for now, let us go, she said as she took the girl in her arms and carried her. Your little sister is waiting for you, she said as she readied herself to run before. There is one more here. A man shouted. And her heart dropped as she saw a man, dressed like a bandit, just a little further away from her. Oh, another, said as he appeared behind her, and a pretty one too, he said, licking his lips as though he just saw his food. She holds the little girl tighter as the bandits come closer to her and she is bracing herself for the worst as her back hit the wall when a flash of purple appeared before her eyes and cut down the bandits one by one, and before she knows it she is looking at the back of her savior, clad in silver armor and orange scarf fluttering in the wind. And that's why, Sophia said as she finished the story of how she met Shay for the first time, and I was so surprised to find him here as one of the Archbishop's knight just as I joined the Order of Saint Cethlene's peacekeeper, she said. So, he is your knight in shining armor before he even donned his uniform, huh? Edwin said. That's right, and in that moment on, Sophia said, Sir Shay is quite cool, she said, and that day, even amidst all the bloodshed and all the chaos, Sophia said, to me, he is clarity among all of it, she said. Edwin smiled. But how do you know what you feeling is love and not gratitude? He asked. I just know, Sophia said. Love is not something you'll expect, and love doesn't give any signs or anything, she said. It just happened before you know it, she said softly. Edwin smiled again. Sophia always say something interesting, and that's why he love her company. And I'll be cheering you on, he said. The Archbishop might demote me and even excommunicate me when she learned that I'm helping you take away Shay from her side, but I'll support you, Edwin said with a smile. Thank you, Sir Eddie, Sophia said. Manuela hummed to herself as she reorganized and restocking her supply for the infirmary before she is interrupted by a soft knock on her open door. Yes, she asked with a smile, expecting seats at her door, but to her surprise, it's the Archbishop, Professor. She asked. Sorry if you are expecting seats, but I asked him to meet you later than planned, Byleth said. Do you need something from me, Professor? Manuela asked. Not me, but Suthies, Byleth said. She said that she want to talk this over tea and cakes if possible, she said. Well, this is an unexpected surprise, Manuela said. The goddess herself wanted to talk to me. She asked. Byleth nodded in response. I wonder what for? Manuela asked. She doesn't tell me anything other than that she needed to tell you something, Byleth said. Manuela considered this for a while before realization hit Manuela. Well, I would be honored to talk with the goddess, she said. And who am I to refuse tea and sweets offered by the goddess herself, Manuela said. Then, Byleth said as she motioned for her to follow her. He sat on the pier in a meditation pose as he closed his eyes and become one with the earth. This is it, he thought as he took a deep breath. I don't know what Byleth did, but it's happening. The thing that we never thought happened, he thought. The battle of the century. Manuela, a former songstress and a physician and professor against the progenitor god of Fodlan, Suthies, and her sort of friend/enemy, Arvel. He thought, wait, why was Arvel involved in whatever Byleth and Suthies got into? He thought as he crossed his arms together and tilted his head. Someone looks occupied, Byleth said from behind him. Mind if I cut in? She asked. This effectively take him out of his mind as he heard the sound he loves so much. Not at all, Your Grace, he said as he shot her a smile. I was just thinking of how there is a battle of the century happening right now, and here we are, he said. Relaxes and leaned back with his arms supporting him. Relaxing, he said. Shame, Byleth said as she mimicked his position. What did Suthies wanted to talk about with Manuela that she have to drag Arvel away and order us to stay away from the monastery as far as possible? He asked. Do you expect Suthies to tell me anything? Byleth asked. So, that's a don't ask, huh? He said. Called it, he said with a sigh. If you already know, then why bother asking me? Byleth asked as she closed her eyes as the wind blows. I figured that you can make her tell you at least, he said. Well, this Suthies we are talking about, Byleth said as she sat upright. If she want to keep a secret, she will keep it, she said. As long as it's nothing major, he said. A comfortable silence enveloped them for a while before. Say, Byleth started, are you busy today? She asked. Weirdly enough, my schedule is free, he said, remembering how every shift for today have been taken. Why? He asked. Since Suthies wanted us away from the monastery as far as possible, Byleth said. How about going somewhere? She asked. He smirked at her. Your Grace, he said, are you asking me on a date? He asked. Well, since you are unwilling to ask me yourself, I figured that I should just do it myself, Byleth said, shooting him a smile. And there is something I wanted to show you, she said. Where to? He asked. Greetings, Your Holiness, Manuela said as she curtsied before the pendant where the goddess is currently residing and to the pocket of watch of her friend/enemy of sort. I'm humbled to be invited in this elegant tea party, she said. No, the honor is mine, Ms. Casagranda, Suthies said, consider this tea party as a thank you as well for always looking after my extended family along with my great-granddaughter, Suthies. Said. I, Manuela. Said, not quite sure how to respond with the grace the goddess have given her. It is my pleasure, your holiness, she said. Now, let us talk, Suthies. Said. Manuela took a sip of her tea. Is this about what me and Byleth discussed the last time? She asked after she put down her cup. Suthies hummed in confirmation. Did I somehow offend you, your holiness? Manuela asked. Not at all, Suthies. Said it's just, she said before taking a deep breath, I have no problem with your outlook on love, Ms. Casagranda, she said, frankly speaking, it is a rather romantic and soft view about love, Suthies said. Oh, Manuela said with a blush. But, Suthies said, I want you take into consideration that my vessel knows nada ions about love, she said, and that talk seems a little risque and a little above her understanding at the moment. Suthies said, that kind of soft outlook is naive, Suthies said. Manuela kept silent as she waited for Suthies to continue. My great-granddaughter is still learning and I don't want her to have a preconception of what love is about, Suthies said. I don't want to disappoint her when she realized that love isn't all soft, rainbow, and gentle or have her heart broken by Shay if he ever did take advantage of her ever-growing love towards him, Suthies said. I want to teach her by and by about love. That love isn't always rainbow and sunshine but it also came along with another terrifying emotions, ones she is currently feeling right now since her affections is still unrequited and right now, she wanted to monopolize Shay and I'm trying to slowly ease her into simmering down those type of feelings or it might drive Shay away from her, Suthies said. I understand, your holiness, Manuela said as she put down her cup, but I have to agree to disagree with you, she said. Suthies hummed in intrigue. Shall we draw out this discussion a little longer, your holiness? Manuela asked. I understand that Suthies have something to discuss with Manuela, but why Arvel? He asked, remembering how the poor guy was dragged into something he didn't know about. I have no idea, Byleth said as he grabs her by her waist, but I guess it's important, she said as he lifted her up on her horse. Well, if it doesn't involve us then I guess it's fine to let Arvel and Suthies have their own intrigues every once in a while, he said before he mounted his own horse. So, where to? He asked again. It's surprise, Byleth said. Oh. He asked. You'll see, Byleth said. Say, she said as they stride towards the gate. Have something on your mind, your grace? He asked as they wait for the gatekeepers to open the gate. How about a race? Byleth asked. Loser gets to do what the winner wants, she said. Isn't that a bit unfair, your grace? He asked, raising an amused eyebrow towards her. Whatever do you mean, Sir Shay? Byleth asked amusedly. You do know that I don't know a thing where this place is, right? He said, and I have a bad sense of direction, he said as the iron gates of Gareg Mach opened. You'll figure something out, Byleth said with a wink and a smile before she tugged on the rein of her horse, pushing it to run. That's unfair. He shouted after her as he tugged on the rein of his horse. Byleth merely let out a melodic laugh as he follows her. Unknown to them, there is a pair of brown orbs watching them in despair. I understand your apprehension, my lady, Manuela said, and I understand what you are trying to tell me, she said. Suthies hummed in response. But, Manuela said, it is needed, she said. Explain, Suthies said. Explaining the horrible and terrifying feelings that came with love might further drive into denying of such things, thus driving her away from ever trying to learn them, Manuela said. As you can tell, we humans have the tendency to avoid the unknown and even go so far as alienating the unknown, more so if they are as terrifying as what Byleth might be feeling at the moment, Manuela said. But you must understand too, your holiness, Manuela said softly. What? Suthies asked. Love isn't just all those terrifying feelings, Manuela said, especially if the person in question rarely gave the other any reason to feel the darker side of love, she said, and Shay is an example of those, Manuela said, you see, most of the time Byleth is happy and Shay never really gave her any reason to feel uneasy except maybe if she becomes unsure if Shay is treating her in a special way or he is just being nice and polite to her, and maybe that in along the fact that Shay managed to garner some attention is what making her feel uneasy, she said, uneasy enough to make her feel those darker feelings, Manuela said. That's why I want to teach her slowly, Suthies said, and Shay might take advantage of her if he managed to realize just how much Byleth thought of him, she said. I understand, but, Manuela said, Byleth acts too unguardedly sometimes, she said, especially with Shay, and that's the more reason why I talked to her about it last time, Manuela said, and if Shay, the very man you are acting worry about, is any bit of a scoundrel that you fear him to be, then he would have taken advantage of Byleth's feelings towards him by now, but put some trust into him too, Your Holiness, she said. And why is that? Suthies asked. Because Shay might not know this or even try to deny it, but he loves Byleth too much to even think about taking advantage of her, Manuela said, and he is also a little slow when it comes with Byleth, she said, and Byleth is still foreign to the concept of love, Manuela said, that watching them circle around one another made a very entertaining thing to watch, she said. Suthies just groaned. Silence enveloped them for a moment. Then, I implore you to teach her what you can, Ms. Casagranda, Suthies said. It would my pleasure, Your Holiness, Manuela said. Now everything is said and done, Arvel said. Why am I here? He asked in annoyance as the pocket watch bounced on the table. Well, it involved your vessel too, Suthies said. I win, Byleth said as she stopping her horse just short before the hill. You have a head start, Your Grace, he said as he stopped next to her. That's not exactly fair, he said. Are you, Byleth said before a teasing smile appeared on her face. Winning, Shay? She asked smugly. No, he said, I was just stating that you are not playing fair this time, my lady, he said as he unmounted his horse, and also, that's a bad pun, he stated. You still humor me, Byleth said as he helped her down her horse. I will always do, Your Grace, he said as he put her down. Even if you don't like what I want to do? Byleth asked as she holds his hand. Even then, he said. Why? Byleth asked as she lead him to the top of the hill. I always like it when you are happy, he said, and I'm happy as long as you are, he said as he caressed her cheek with his finger. Even if I might put you in a place where you will be unhappy or will get hurt? Byleth asked. Even then, he said. And why is that? Byleth asked. Are you some sort of a masochist? She asked. No, he said, I just know that you will never put me in that sort of situation, he stated. You trust me that much? Byleth asked. I trust you with all my heart, Your Grace, he stated. Byleth was quiet for a moment as they neared the top. So, what is it that you wanted to show me? He asked as he saw trees after trees atop the hill. Just you wait, Byleth said as they reached the top. Okay. He said, unsure of what he is supposed to be seeing before he looks towards Byleth's direction or where she is supposed to be. Your Grace? He asked as he looked around for any signs of Byleth. Up here. Byleth called out from above the tall and single tree on the top of the hill. He just smiled as he was met with the smile he loves so much. Byleth's happy and natural smile. Will you just be contented to look at me from afar, or would you rather join me up here? Byleth asked. He just responded by taking off his boots and putting it aside Byleth's shoes and started climbing up. I see that you choose wisely, Sir Knight, Byleth said. Welcome, she said as he took his place beside her, and this is what I want to show you, she said as she faced the setting sun. And what he see took his breath away. The view of the setting sun, painting the sky with the barrage of the colors of crimson and violet. The lake below serves as a mirror for the sky above, making it seems like the sky have descended on the earth below too and reflecting the setting sun as though the sun have gained a twin on the ground. Wow, he said breathlessly. I know, Byleth said. I usually go here to relax whenever you are away, she said. It calms me down, she said with a soft smile. I never thought a place like this existed, he said looking towards Byleth. It's beautiful, right? Byleth said as she turned her eyes on him. He sat there tongue-tied as he looks at her. The setting sun shining on her gave her a soft and gentle glow. Byleth's eyes softened as she anticipated his answer. That's right, he said turning towards the scenery again. I have been living in Fodland for all my life and I never thought things such as this existed, he said as he admired the way the lake below made it seems like the two suns is merging into one as it sets on the horizon. But why are you sharing it with me? He asked as he turned his attention back to Byleth. Like you told me before, Byleth said as their hands moved towards one another. I'm the first person you wanted to share something when you find something beautiful, right? She said. He nods as their fingers intertwined. That's the case for me too, Byleth said. I want to share everything I found to be beautiful with you, she said. And if I may add, Byleth said as they closer to another. What? He asked as their foreheads touched each other. I also wanted to share my own happiness with you, Byleth said. If I find something that makes me happy, you are the first face that appeared in my mind, she said. As the sky turned dark and billions of diamond have decorated the stars and everything turns tranquil once more. He looks her in the eyes before he let out a soft smile as they pressed their forehead to one another. I'm happy to hear that, Byleth, he said softly before he realized that he called her by name. He said trying to find a word to apologize for that slip of a tongue making her separate from her. You called me by my name, Byleth said softly as she leaned towards him, hands on his chest and the other on his cheek. Do, he said as he instinctively wrapped his arms around her waist. Did I offend you? He asked. No, Byleth said as they both leaned closer to one another. I love it, she said. Silence enveloped them as they come closer and closer. He closed his eyes as he inched closer and closer towards her lips and Hey, there, Suthies said as she appeared on Byleth. We are back, Arvel said as he appeared on him. This caused them to abruptly separate from one another. What the Gaia? He shouted as he falls down the tree with an undignified thud. Suthies said. Did we interrupt something? She asked. And nothing, Byleth said as she tried to calm her beating heart. Are you all right, Shay? She asked, looking down to him. I'll live, he said. Ow, he muttered in pain. Chapter 35, The Night Before the Goddess Rite of Rebirth. Meanwhile, this is a nice change of pace, Ignatz said as they navigate through the town. It is, Valerie said as she looked at the shops. A little day off might take my mind off things, she said as she felt her head aching again. Lately, the headaches keeps getting worse and she thought that if she drowned herself in working non-stop during the day then it might disappear, but it didn't work and she thought that today's outing would calm the throbbing in her head. Her blood runs cold as she remembered the last time she felt this intense throbbing in her head was. Oh. A familiar voice said behind her. Is my eyes deceiving me or did I just manage to happen upon such an unluck today? He asked. Rude as always, Valerie said Heracles, she said as she met the man's piercing and menacing purple eyes that is so different from the ones she saw. Eye color just like Epimon's vessel, Valerie thought, but no. She thought, there is no way there is a connection between the runt and them, she thought. What? Heracles asked. Cat got your tongue, princess? He asked. Just taken aback by your ugliness, Valerie said. Heracles said. Lovely as ever, he said. A friend of yours, Heracles? A woman asked. Valerie looked to the direction of the voice and saw a woman and narrowed her eyes. That woman is an Agar then, but she don't recall seeing her back in Great Adrestia. Oh, Heracles said, where are my manners? He asked. Did you ever have one, old man? Valerie asked. I do, Heracles said. I just showed them where they are due, he said. Duchess of Atlanta Valerie Helena Regnus, he said. Duchess of Atlanta. Bias asked that old name, she said. I didn't know there is a survivor of that house of heretics, she said venomously. Valerie clenched her fist in anger. Well, this woman have killed many of my brethren, Heracles said. Maybe I should tear your head off your shoulders and feed it to the wolves, he said as he let out a terrifying malicious and murderous intent. Valerie almost draw her powers upon feeling that but halt, Heracles, Bias said. She is not our target, she said. Heracles scoffed as he calmed down. Maybe some other time, beautiful slaughterer, Heracles said as he and Bias walked away. Big sister Ignatz asked as he finally calmed his beating heart. Let's go home, Valerie said as she tried contain her rage. But, Raphael said, why did you let them go? He asked. We can always dash, he said. I didn't let them go, Valerie said. They let us live, she said. So, he said as he looked at Byleth, who is busy putting a sealing spell to each coffins. The king's entourage is arriving by noon. He asked. Byleth merely nodded as she finished casting the spell. And I was hoping that you would escort them here, she said. Meet them halfway, she said. Of course, he said with a bow. Are you sure you don't need me here? He asked. As much as I wanted to say yes, Byleth said, but I know you'd rather help around than loiter around me, she said. But I rather like loitering around you, he said as he leaned on Byleth. You're heavy, you sack of guts, Byleth said as she playfully pushed him away, but without avail. She said with a giggle. But you are so comfortable to lean on, he said with a soft giggle. So warm, he said. Yeah, Byleth said, but you are heavy, she stated. He sat upright and looked at her in mock offense. Are calling me, he said with his hands on his chest. Fat, your grace? He asked. Not as much as I was calling you a dead weight, Byleth said with a smile. Fair enough, he said with a laugh. Speaking of which, Byleth said, did you get taller? She asked. And leaner than I remembered, she said as she measured their height. I recall you being just this tall when we first met, but now, Byleth said, not to mention a bit scrawny, she added. I was. He said proudly, with me finally getting the right nutrition and the heavy trainings Alois subjected me to since the day I become a knight did wonders to me, he said, all to the dedication of serving you, he added. Well, I'm glad to hear that you are getting the proper nutrition, Byleth said, and that you are a late bloomer, she said. Hey, men blossoms later than women, he said. I highly doubt that, Byleth said. I'd say you are just a late bloomer, she said. Well, we have to disagree to agree with one another, he said. Well, she is right, Arvel chimed in. You were a pipsqueak when you are a child, he said. And how would you know that? He asked offended. You are not even with when I was a child, he said. I might not be able to talk to you back then, but I can see through your memories, Arvel said, and saying that, I know every little embarrassing things you've done as a child, Arvel said. Shut it, he said. Oh. Byleth said suddenly interested. Tell me more, she said. Yes, do tell us more, Epimens, Suthes said equally as interested as her vessel. And why do you need such information, your grace? He asked. For research, Byleth stated. About what? He asked, raising an eyebrow. To make it known to all of Fodlan about how much of a delightful person you are for all times, of course, Byleth said. Or a laughing stock for all times, he retorted. Complains and complains, Suthes said, is that all you have ever known? Suthies, said. Not when I was going to be a laughing stock of Fodlan for all times. He said. Or one of the densest men of Fodlan, Arvel said blankly, knowing that the Archbishop will probably write you in a heroic and charming kind of way, he said, and how you are so oblivious about her apparent dash, Arvel said. Arvel, Byleth exclaimed. He raised his eyebrow in confusion towards Byleth. Or to put it simply, Suthies said, she is simply swooning over you in all of her journal entries. She said, that all of Fodlan would probably know how much she ado dash, Suthies said before Byleth's hand gripped the pendant to silence the goddess. What do you mean? He asked as he noticed Byleth turning slightly red. Hey, are you well, your grace? He asked as comes closer to check her temperature. I am, Byleth said, just a little hot here, she said, not meeting his eyes. This place is cooler than any other around the monastery, he said. Are you sure you are well? He asked. I am, Byleth said. No need to worry about me, she said. She is stuttering, he thought as he narrowed his eyes in concern as he saw Byleth started to take deep breaths. She is probably already exhausted since she have been working with these spells all morning, he thought as he moves closer to her. Shay, Byleth asked as she felt his eyes on her. What are you doing? She asked as he lifts her in his arms. Taking you to Manuela, he stated. You need to rest, he said. She need to rest or she might get ill, he thought as he carried her out of the mausoleum, ignoring Byleth's protest. Suthies and Arvel just sigh. Someone really need to knock some senses into this knucklehead. No. She thought as she walked towards the cathedral. Sir Eddie says that there is nothing between them, I just have to trust him, she thought as dark clouds started to surround her mind. It will be okay, she thought before done complaining, your grace. Shay asked as he walks towards the stairs leading to the audience room while carrying the Archbishop in his arms. Got tired of it, more like it, the Archbishop said. You are too, she said. Determined? Shay asked. I was going to say stubborn, but you do you, the Archbishop said. I do what I do for you, your grace, Shay said with a chuckle. Not that I'm complaining either, the Archbishop said. I rather like that you are carrying me like this, she said as she leaned on his chest. You are just too lazy to walk, Shay said. That you are right, the Archbishop said as she wrapped her arms around Shay. She can feel her heart falling down to the pit of her stomach as she watched their interactions together. Her eyes met the Archbishop's eyes. She saw the way the Archbishop's indigo orbs glare at her as she wrapped her arms tighter around Shay as they passed her by in a possessive and almost fearful way. And she knows what the Archbishop is saying at that moment. He is mine. They are not together yet, but, she thought, that doesn't mean that she is assured of his feelings towards her as well. I still have a chance, she thought as she continued her way to the cathedral. I still have a chance, she thought as Shay's smiling towards the Archbishop flashed through her mind, the smile that solely belongs to the Archbishop. Hey, there, Edwin said as he tapped her shoulders. Sir Eddie, she greeted rather glumly. Did something happen, Miss Sophia? Edwin asked. She looked at the knight and nodded to herself. Sir Eddie is always there by her side and she is glad that he is there to listen to all of her problem. Actually, she started. Blood splattered across the brick road as Anaximandros chop a man in half. Damn, Bias said, always making such a mess, she said. Who cares, Anaximandros said with a shrug of his shoulder. As long as I get the job done then I can at least have some fun, he said. Bias just scoffed as she started casting her spell. So, after this, Heracles said. Yes, Bias said. It seems like we are just in time for the goddess rite of rebirth, she said. Now, Heracles, she said, shall you light the fire to signal the beginning of our assault to Gareg Mach? Bias asked. Should you do that before the ritual? Heracles asked. Well, let's just say that we are letting them know we are coming for them and that, Bias said as she gave a wicked smile. They should give us a welcome worthy of us, she said. Heracles flicked his cigarette out and smiled. My, aren't you a piece of work, he said as his purple eyes turned a dangerous red, working me to the bones without any additional pay at all. Heracles said as his arms transformed into two dragons. I guess having fun would have to do for now, he said with a grin as the dragon breathed a stream of fire across town, effectively burning the town before he transformed into a hybrid of an eagle and man. Screams of panic and fear echoes as Heracles tear through their ranks effortlessly. Monster! A man shouted as he saw a half-man and half-monster comes to their way. He said, but was cut short as Heracles swooped in and took his upper half. How crude, Bias said, but it suit us just fine, she said with a smile as the town burned and as she heard those beastly screams of panic of those descendants of the beast. Let this be a tribute to your return, Bias said Fell Star, she said with a smile as Heracles' beastly form continued to rampage through the town, wreaking havoc everywhere and not once heeding the cries of mercy and fear he have inflicted upon the citizens of this doomed town. Heracles swallowed another poor soul before he let out a mighty roar, one that will make sure that the goddess have heard the condemnation of these souls. Check the description for the links to the author.